Welcome, everybody. This is Heather Snyder. I'm Chief Revenue Officer with the Omnia Group. Thank you for joining today. We are going to get started in just a moment. I hope for those of you who are watching from the North and the Midwest, I hear it's very, very chilly. So hopefully you are somewhere cozy and warm. I'm here from Tampa, Florida, where we're going to get a high of like 78 today. So you probably don't like hearing that. I'm sorry. But we're having a nice little warm front right now. Thank you, Raina. It's always nice to see you. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for joining. I always appreciate those of you who come back over and over for our webinars. We love doing these each month, and it's a pleasure to be leading this one today. So again, my name is Heather Snyder. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at the Omnia Group. I'm here in Tampa, Florida. And as Chief Revenue Officer, I head up sales, marketing, and client delivery. So I get to deal with everything as it relates to our clients and the delivery of our solutions and services to our great clients. And I just love my job, and I love this topic of recognition. To get us started, I'm just going to switch a little so I can say hi to you on a bigger screen. And I'm going to ask you to join me in an activity. I'd like you to think of a person who once gave you the kind of recognition that really made you feel valued and engaged. So think of that person, think of that time, and think of the way it made you feel. And it could have been a teacher, it could have been a family member, a relative, or hopefully a boss or a coworker. But just think about that person, that time, what they did to make you feel recognized and valued, and how it made you feel. And when you've got it in your mind, if you could just please type Y in the chat so I know when you're with me. Great. I see them coming in. Wonderful. Kathleen, does K mean you don't have one, or just you put K instead of Y? Not to call you out. But hopefully everyone is able to come up with an idea of that person, that time that made them feel valued. I'm hopeful that everyone has at least had one person in their life, one moment in their life where somebody got it right and how they felt. Great. I love seeing these yeses come in. So do me a favor and just remember that. We're going to come back to that event at the end of this webinar, and I'll get us going into the topic. So this is all about how we capture the hearts of our people and get that right and leave many, many others with that feeling that we're all thinking about right now, that person in that time in our life. So here's our agenda for today. First of all, we're going to talk about why this matters. Why does employee recognition even matter, and why should it be top of mind for us? And then we'll discuss ways to make sure we are getting it right. And of course, it wouldn't be an Omnia webinar if we didn't talk about personality traits and how those traits impact how people want to be recognized and how we can get it right. And then we'll share some strategies for how to do that. I did get a lot of questions before the webinar. It was great. So we will address questions in the end. And I have some that I can pick out that I already got from you. So thank you all for your engagement already in this webinar as you registered. It gave me a lot of good things to know that was top of your mind to make sure we covered. So if you are new to Omnia, just a little bit of a plug. It's not a big promotion here, but we do like to give context for who Omnia is. Omnia was established 35 years ago, and we provide tools, resources, and customized services that help organizations hire the right people, hire the best people for the job, and then develop them to their full potential. And we do that through scientifically valid instruments and industry benchmarks for over 200 jobs that help categorize what makes the right profile and how do you match that to a person's personality. And we'll get into personality, like I said, in a little bit as we get into the agenda. So first, I want to just start with something that happened in my life recently. If you were on the call when it started, I shared that I'm in Tampa, Florida, where we're enjoying some balmy weather today. It's in the high 70s. And I know we're having a really cold front up north and in the Midwest. I've got family members that have sent me pictures of the snow and the cold. So I apologize right up front for my weather. It's probably annoying hearing that. But we have had our share of cold spells recently. And a couple of weeks ago, it was a Saturday. My husband was out of town and it was really cold. And in Tampa, that means it was like 40, but it's relative. I did grow up in Michigan, so I'm used to what that really cold weather is like. But it's funny how your blood thins. And yes, go Bucks, go Buccaneers. Thank you, Sarah. But anyway, it was a really cold day here in Tampa. My husband was gone. And I usually go to the grocery store and buy those starter logs. And I burn those all day long. And I know they're not the most, environmentally friendly thing to do. And my husband is very traditional. He had just gone a week prior and brought home a whole truckload of wood. And so I sent him a picture of the fire and I said, look, it's going to be a fire kind of day. And he said, I challenge you to go out and get the wood and build a real fire and keep it going all day long. And my husband and I are one to challenge each other all the time. And I'm a person who loves a challenge. So I'm like, I can do this. I can do this. So the first thing I did is I Googled how to start a fire and looked up how to do it. And I had the benefit of the fire starter log going. But I quickly assembled some wood and some paper and I built myself up a really nice fire. And I was super proud of myself. And then, like every other Saturday, I got busy. I started doing laundry. I started doing some projects. I was watching Netflix. I had a lot of things going. And I noticed that every time I left the room and I came back, the fire was either gone, dead, or a dying ember. And it was a real challenge. And thankfully, we had some tools by the fireplace. So I kept kind of moving logs around and getting it going again and using all the things that you're supposed to put in a fire to keep going. But it hit me that every time I stopped really tending to it, if it got away and my attention drifted elsewhere, the fire drifted too. And I was honestly thinking about this webinar because our theme for the month at Omnia is love, because it's Valentine's Day month. And we've been writing and blogging all about love for your employees, love for your clients. And I knew I was doing this webinar on employee recognition. And I thought, wow, this fire is kind of like employee recognition. You can't just do it once. And if you really want to get the flames of your employees going and keep them flaming, keep them engaged, keep that fire burning, you really need to tend to it often. You can't just do it every once in a while. You can't walk away. And so I thought this might be a good starting point for our discussion today. And it kind of weaves in through the whole message. So let's talk about the why. Think about these numbers. I'm showing these numbers for a purpose: 46, 89, 15,000. So what do they tell us? The number 46 is actually a percentage. 46% of new hires fail in the first 18 months. In fact, according to a recent CEB study that was a corporate executive board study that was published in Forbes, over 50% of executives fail in the first 18 months. So it's a pretty high number of people that will not make it in their jobs longer than a year. The next number is 89, and that's the why. 89% of those 46 to 70% of people who fail in their job the first 18 months do so because of a poor culture fit. And the last number is 15,000, and that's a dollar amount. $15,000 is the average hiring expense for an individual making $50,000. It's usually about 30% of the person's first year salary is what you're going to spend to hire somebody. Think about on the higher end for sales, commissionable positions where they're in a revenue role, or your executives, it can be as much as 150 times the annual salary of that person and the cost of it. So these are some astonishing stats that kind of build the case for why should we care about keeping those flames of employee motivation and inspiration going. If 46% and higher fail, if it's due to poor culture fit, we'll talk about that, and the cost to the organization. Now, I'm an optimist, so I always like to think about the positive side of things. So why should it matter? Let's talk about what a happy employee does. A happy employee is 31% higher productive than anybody else. They can generate 37% more sales than anyone else and can have 3 times the amount of creativity than a disgruntled employee because they're free to think and they feel valued and encouraged and inspired. So those are some flip side stats of what's the benefit for making sure we have happy employees. But it is like stoking a fire. So let's go back to my instructions that I Googled. These were the things that I found on how do you build a fire and keep a fire going. The first thing was to ensure the damper is fully open. Now that's important because you can smoke yourself out. Your windows could become fogged pretty quickly if your chimney wasn't open. I thought it was also interesting that they said to warm the chimney. They actually recommended taking a newspaper or something and lighting it up the chimney. And then obviously building the fire. Now, I don't have a whole lot of here about building the fire, but that was the most important thing. They talked about assembling, kindling, newspaper, logs. And they also talked about making sure that you don't put too many heavy logs on top because they'll smother or totally take down the fire. So you got to make sure the logs supported each other. And yes, the slides will be shared. I just saw that in the chat. So it's really important that they support each other. And that was one of the things I kept noticing. If I walked away from the fire, inevitably some of the logs fell away from each other. So they were no longer flaming each other, which we'll talk about the importance of peers and colleagues and culture when we get into this. And then finally, I laughed at this final one, troubleshoot. And they said, you know, if your fire's not going, here are some things to consider. And then it added an exclamation point, don't add gasoline. I was like, thank goodness I knew not to do that. But I thought, gosh, an overambitious or overly eager person who's just meaningful intent could sometimes add gas to a fire instead of doing the right thing. And so let's talk about how this plays into it. How does this relate to your employees and making sure that you're keeping the fires and the flame going within your employees? First of all, you do have to think about, is your employee fully open? I saw in some of the questions in the comments that employees, you know, you've got some employees who like to be recognized differently or may not appreciate the kind of recognition you're giving. So you got to make sure that the employee is open to whatever form of recognition you're going to give and that they're going to be fueled by it, that it's going to be meaningful to them. You have to know what's going to light that flame. So again, I always like to start with that starter log still. That's what helps me. And then I don't recommend the match. I use one of those sticks that has the lighter fluid in it, so I can just keep clicking it over and over. It makes it easier for me. And I have to know where to light those logs. So you got to know where it's going to actually ignite. And then again, that point about the logs, making sure all the pieces come into place together and that they're there to support each other. And then finally, troubleshooting is key. When it's not working, you know it's not working. If you're not getting the behavior you want to see from recognition and engagement, you got to figure out why, and you got to do some troubleshooting. You got to ask, you got to dig, you got to do some analysis to really make sure you're going about it the right way. So one thing that this plays into, and again, it was a question that was asked, is personality. How does personality really play into the way you recognize employees? And it is a big factor because we all want to be recognized actually in different ways. None of us have the same way or will value the same forms of recognition. It's a very personal and personalized preference. And so that's where the Omnia profile comes in. And I'll just give a little bit of a header to this, but it will all be in the context of recognition and engagement. And so what our Omnia profile measures, if you haven't had a chance to take it yet, we'd love to hear from you and we'll give you the opportunity. We measure 4 key traits: the level of assertiveness, a person's style of communication, the level of pace and adaptability one prefers to work in, and then the employee or person leader's need for structure. And so let's talk about how that plays into recognition. But before we do that, I want to say something about this. I kind of tricked you a little bit because I talked about this webinar being about recognition, And it's actually a little bit more about employee engagement, because doing these kinds of things that we're going to talk about today increases the engagement of your employees, and engagement leads to client satisfaction, employee retention, less turnover. So it's not necessarily the act of the external reward or gift you give to someone. It's really what you're doing to help engage them in meaningful work. And so think about it this way. Would you prefer to be recognized by giving an opportunity to have more achievement, to achieve more things, achieve greater things, achieve visibility, as much as you would being recognized for the contribution you did and you got in doing so? Think about public recognition versus private, being addressed in private. What about being given long-term goals versus short-term goals? Short-term goals that are attainable over time, that you can celebrate milestones, and then long-term goals that you can get real involved in and build commitment with a team and a person or yourself in that long-term goal and accomplishment. So think about sprint versus marathon. Little project, something that you can just bite off and see a result, versus a long-term growth plan. And then think about also recognition and engagement in terms of, are you trying to strengthen the foundation that you're building with someone, or are you looking at breaking new ground, giving that person maybe something new and exciting to work with that they would appreciate? So why I bring all this up in terms of engagement and recognition, first of all, are to think of those two together. And then the versus, the things that we just talked about, plays back into, again, a person's style, their personality traits, and what motivates them. So going back to that motivation piece, I'm going to just break down the Omnia profile a little bit more in terms of what motivates people. First of all, level of assertiveness. Someone who has a very high degree of assertiveness loves the chance to grow and assume new responsibilities, and they love personal incentives. So think of your traditional salesperson who is willing to put a good bit of their pay on the line for commission, because they're pretty sure they can knock out those sales numbers. They're comfortable with that risk, and they're in themselves, they see that commission as their reward for getting that sale. Now think of someone with a less degree of assertiveness. We call those more highly supportive, collaborative, risk averse sometimes people in those roles. And they really appreciate job security, a supportive work environment, and lower risk goals. So they don't mind being motivated by a goal, and they certainly love to be praised, but their recognition and their reward and their engagement comes in security and in knowing that they're appreciated and part of a team goal, a team purpose. Another personality trait that comes in here is communication style. So individuals with a preference for a lot of engagement and public, they love to be out in front, they love to be with lots of people. Those individuals love to publicly recognized and praised for their success and love to do that. So your salespeople, again, who love public recognition, also don't mind the leaderboards, the stacked rankings, and they'll feel very motivated and recognized by seeing their names at the top. And the ones who aren't at the top can get very inspired and motivated by seeing themselves at the lower end of the board. But someone who's more analytical, fact-based, less of that, and especially less assertive, is much more going to appreciate individual recognition and praise, and the opportunity to work on solving the problems that are getting in the way of success. Asking someone who's more fact-based, problem-solving oriented would love to be involved in a project to help improve something. And when it's done, they would really prefer a private letter, a personal phone call, a conversation that talks about the impact they had versus publicly praising them in front of the whole company. The level of pace is the degree to which a person likes to juggle a lot of things or work methodically, one project at a time. Multitasking versus one thing at a time. Fast-paced individuals really appreciate short-term goals and a dynamic work environment. So to be involved in a lot of different activities and a lot of different things, and a way to see their progress more quickly. Whereas people with a more methodical pace are fine working on a long-term project. Doesn't mean they won't want to be praised and recognized for accomplishment over time, but they'll be much more patient and seeing that end goal in sight, and will really appreciate the recognition for the project completion and their tenaciousness, their patience that it took for them to get through and lead the team through that project. And then finally, structure. That is the degree to which a person needs and values structure. And those individuals who value less structure really want freedom and autonomy and the trust to use their judgment. So they will be very motivated and feel praised when you give them a chance to drive change on their own, not necessarily do it, but to be seen the leader or the inspirer of the change. And also freedom and autonomy and empowerment to make their own decisions, where a more structured individual is really going to appreciate mentorship, coaching, giving them the opportunity to be part of that team. So consider that even giving someone a mentor or personal coach for 30, 60, 90 days could be seen as a form of recognition to someone who appreciates that, but probably not to someone who doesn't as much. So that's a little bit on what the Omnia profile talks about motivation. Now let's go back to what employees want. When you think about this, this is really about what's keeping employees in work, at work, engaged at work. And Daniel Pink wrote a great book a few years ago called Drive. And it was the surprising truth about what motivates us. And I was really touched with this book. And he came up with the three main things that employees really value. And if we as leaders can think about how do we put these things in place for our employees every single day, we can help them feel inspired, engaged, and more motivated. Those three things are competence, feeling like you can do your job, having the tools, the skills, and the support and the training to do it. Autonomy, having the freedom to do your job, not being micromanaged, not being told what to do every single day or being looked over your shoulder, but feeling I've got that ability, I'm competent, and my manager and my leaders believe in me, and I've got the autonomy to exercise and do my job. And then finally, purpose. There's been a lot of research lately about purpose and the need that employees feel for feeling connected to a greater thing. So if employees can feel like what your company does really matters and makes an impact on society and the world or people, or as well as what kind of missions do you support? So are you involved in volunteer work? Do you support your employees going out and networking and bringing your solution to value and more of a community mindset? Really helps engage those employees more and motivates them. Culture and value alignment is really key. Strong communication and fairness. Everyone wants to see equity. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same. It's not a one size fits all. I got asked that question a lot too. In the question submissions, one size fits all does not work. Like we just talked about, different personalities drive different motivations, and same thing. But people do want to see fairness. They want to believe that everyone's given a fair opportunity, a fair shot. So those are all really important things for what employees want. But again, cash does matter. So let's get into some of the recognition traits and what people want to see. So first of all, when you're going to award with cash, it's really important to be consistent with your current structure. And of course, everyone has to worry about the bottom line and what we're doing, and being obviously fiduciary responsibility. So consider individual constructs versus team incentives. And again, think about that personality. If someone's rewarded by that long-range goal and some personal motivation, that can really make a difference, whereas others might be more inspired by a team incentive. Think about those short-term campaigns. Think about the individual, those milestones for a really long project, and giving out a spiff or a reward for doing something that you want to see more of. If you're trying to get more maybe customer referrals in, think about a little cash reward or a voucher or a gift certificate for doing an employee, a little incentive around what you're trying to motivate or see happening in your organization right now. And then focused project goals versus individual incentives, really thinking about how do you motivate people individually versus on the rewards of a team. And again, think about where you make that recognition. So if you're going to reward someone who really went out, all out and did an amazing thing, but they did something over and above that wasn't part of what others did, you definitely want to do that more privately if you're not planning on giving the people the same reward. And I think this is a really good time to say it's really important that when you recognize someone in some ways, it needs to be private. And the individual needs to know that it's private and that you don't share this, just like we're Ask not to share salary information. Any kind of recognition that's done privately shouldn't be shared. So let's talk about kudos. So beyond recognition, what can make a difference? Sending a handwritten note, thinking about a praise wall, where a lot of us are working in a remote environment right now. And you can come up with a team site that's just all about praise and recognition, where you put comments from clients, comments from peers to peers, sharing good news, highlighting that goes a long way. I recently had a friend in India post a letter that her company sent to her husband. And I found that so interesting, and I had to put this in here to share because this is a form of recognition I would have never thought of. But she had been working on a project for a long time and was putting in some late hours and having to work a couple of Saturdays. The company sent the spouse a note of appreciation and thanked them for the support of the work she was doing, and then let them know how much they valued her, which went a long way. She shared personally that her husband was so motivated by that and thinking that, gosh, sometimes our spouses put in so much work, but we might say, does the company really appreciate it? And the company took time to let them know. Doing things in different ways. So you can recognize people, again, in public, in meetings and huddles, if that's the way they like to be recognized, but taking that time to do it personally, picking up the phone and calling someone goes a long way. And then finding ways to just do milestones differently. Here at Omnia, we have a digital milestone process we use now for recognizing birthdays and anniversaries. And I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary at Omnia. So I was on the receiving end of it. And I was just touched by how many people took time to write a personal note on the digital card that talked about the impact I'd had in a year, which just felt really good. And I thought, man, that does make a difference when you hear from your peers in different ways, and you're recognized for those celebrations. So I'll share that personal story. I will also caution you, because I think it's really important to involve employees in these programs, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But we recently celebrated the anniversary of the person who's in charge of those digital cards, and we had an oops moment when we realized that we hadn't thought about who was going to send her card. So if you do that or delegate that, make sure you're taking care of the person who's in charge of that task. I'm really sorry about that. I know that my colleague who had that happen to her is on this call, so sorry about that. So you'll appreciate that I'm sharing that so others don't make the same mistake. And then never underestimate food. When people are working really hard, a little DoorDash, Uber Eats, Spoonful of Comfort is one that I just found recently, where they'll send literally a nice little cup of soup and some goodies to a person. We can really get creative in these remote times, and people still enjoy food, even if we can't bring them together to have that communal pizza or happy hour at the end of a project. Find different ways to do it. Send them an Uber Eats card and then have a Zoom happy hour to celebrate the success of the team. And then another thing is to know you don't have to do it all. Like I was just referencing, this can be obviously leader to employee, but think about peer-to-peer recognition programs and involving peers. And I want to share another example. I was recently talking with a friend of our family who is early on in her career, just took on a new role, and she was celebrating an anniversary. And I'm always interested in, especially talking to people who are new in their career, about what they're experiencing in their company and culture. And I asked her how she was enjoying her job. And she said that company was making her feel wonderful. She said she'd never had a job where she felt more valued, more capable. And that was meaning that she was feeling hugely engaged in taking on new projects. And so I asked her, what is it that's making that happen? You must have a great boss. And she's like, actually, it's my peers. She said, I work with the best people who support me. They understand, where I come from and what I like doing. We've gotten to know each other, and they're very encouraging of me taking on new projects. They cheer me on, they give me a lot of support, and I feel like I can go to them and ask for help. So when you are thinking about how to recognize and engage an employee, think of my friend Emma and her experience with her colleagues, and how important that is beyond just what the leader or the manager is doing. And then obviously, if you've got a recognition program in place, I would highly suggest dusting it off, especially because work has transitioned so much and we have moved in to remote work. Think about, is your program still working, and get feedback. And then I really like this one. Again, it's not my idea. I'll take it from another team, that after a really huge project, the project was a major success, but people worked on it for more than 2 years. They did a lot of forms of recognition. They sent people a plaque. They did give a cash reward. And then they did company and public praise. And then what they did afterwards was they debriefed how everyone felt about the way they were recognized. And they got a lot of good feedback about how that recognition would have been more appreciated or valued during the project at different milestones, when people were starting to feel very fatigued, losing hope that the project was ever going to come to fruition. So that was one really good piece of feedback they got. And then others didn't appreciate the plaque, which goes into making sure, again, that if you're going to invest money, these rewards can be really expensive. Make sure that the people on your team are going to really value what they want. There's a whole minimalist movement going on now. I've been watching that series on Netflix. So not everybody will appreciate the stuff that collects in their house, whereas it used to be we loved the crystals, statues, and the certificates that were on our walls. So not everybody wants junk, right, Sarah? I like that. Amen. Not everyone wants junk. So I have some chats I want to pay attention to. I see that Greg says, I had a boss one time tell me he treats people fairly, but not equally. I like that, Greg. That's exactly the point I was trying to get at, is there is a distinction in being the same across the board versus treating one the way that they really want to play. And to get that wiggle room in your recognition programs to be able to treat people differently. So thank you for emphasizing that point. And you worked for a great boss who saw that firsthand. So where do you start? It really does start with talking to the people on your team. And again, like I said, debriefing, or even asking up front. When you're getting ready to start a new program, it's not a bad idea to just say to people, what will success look like? And how would you like to celebrate that success as we go through this? So asking what they want. I actually worked for a company once that when I started, in the employee handbook, they had a form on how you preferred to be recognized. And they asked all sorts of questions. Did you like individual or public praise? They were very advanced. This was in the 90s. But they did ask how you preferred to be praised, as well as what kinds of things did you like? What were your personal interests, hobbies? So they quickly tied in then little incentives that were related to the things I was doing. And I have to say a shout out to that company. At the time, my husband and I were building our first home. I was rewarded with a top salesperson of the year award, and I had made a good bit of commission. And the gift that the CEO gave me that was most meaningful, and I still even have some of it today, was a new sound system. They gave us a surround sound system with speakers that we still have on our back porch, and that was a long time ago. So listening to what employees like and then following through if you've asked them can make a difference. And then again, adjusting your style to the employee. I'm a talker. I'm a chatter. I just love to call people. I love to do video calls and praise them. I have people on my team who aren't real comfortable with that. They would much more value a letter, a personal handwritten note. So I've got to adjust my style again to the people on my team and how they like it. I like what Raina's saying. Recognition also entails tough love, genuine feedback. It helps much. A thank you with that genuine authenticity, Raina, is exactly right. And it's super, it will go a long way. It doesn't always have to be cash. And cash is pretty fast. It only lasts so long, especially if you give like a gift certificate or a one and done. But taking time out and really giving someone personal investment. So I'll take that one step further. Raina, I think to the point about feedback, I think it's really important to engage employees in meaningful work. Again, back to that Daniel Pink work and wanting to have a purpose. And a lot of times you could take a challenging employee who's, maybe complaining a lot or has lots of things they think the company needs to fix. and you can find a way to engage that employee in being part of the solution versus part of the problem, and getting meaningfully involved in the improvement of it. Now, when you do that, you've got to be willing to take on the person's ideas again. But I think that's a really important way. And you could also do that in a way of giving feedback of, if you've got lots of ideas about how we could fix it, I'd encourage you to be part of the solution. So, Raina, I don't know if that resonates, but that's the thing I'd build on in terms of how you can take that one step further, that thank you one step further, and go beyond just the cash incentive. Kim, to your point, it's funny. I would love to replicate the survey that my company gave me a while back. And we have a resource page on the Omnia site, and I've added it to my to-do list to add that because I do think it's a helpful survey to give to people. So that's an action that we'll take as Omnia to add to our resources. And then Sarah says, always ask my team what feeds them. Cash, vacation days, candy, gift cards. So I love that. Again, just asking and knowing that people like to be fed differently. I've heard of a lot of companies this year when times are tight and we can't necessarily give out a lot of cash because money is tight, just giving an extended weekend. So if you've got a holiday coming up, give people an extra day. And if you can't let the whole company be off because we got to be there for our clients, split it up. Give half the staff a Friday and give the other half of Tuesday if it's a Monday holiday, or vice versa. If the holiday's Friday, give people an extra day, half the day Thursday and half the day Monday, or half the staff Monday. It's just another way that, again, people feel recognized and rewarded for their contribution in different ways. So use your tools. Again, it wouldn't be an Omnia webinar if we didn't remind you that we already have so many good resources that you have from Omnia as well as you have in your companies. So would encourage everyone to use behavioral assessments. And also, I will say a lot of our customers use the Omnia assessment for hiring and selection, which is great. That's what it was designed for. But many of you in your questions talked about employees who, there was a couple of you who said, gosh, I got in a person who needs constant feedback, constant recognition. If I'm not patting them on the back all the way through, and that takes a lot of your time, right? Saps a lot of your energy, but it's like you have to keep doing that. That person might not be self-aware that that's their need. And the benefit of using an assessment, a personality assessment, and talking about the motivators that we talked about a few slides ago, put that in front of your employees and ask them, and then be honest and specific about that employee who's requiring a lot of pats on the back, just to say, where can you get that recognition elsewhere? Is there a way to feel that sense of accomplishment? Or how about confidence? Because probably what's happening with the person who needs the constant reinforcement is something's going on in their world that's making them feel less reinforced, less confident. So how can you have a conversation about shoring that up? But using an assessment and an objective way of saying, okay, here's what the data says, here's what your personality style says, how much does that sound like what you're experiencing, and how can we shore that up? So the onus goes off of you and you put it on the employee. So I hope that's helpful. Use your surveys, look at your teams, and use teams. If you're just done or you're so spent because of this pandemic and everything else you're doing, having to do to keep the company afloat, put recognition in the form of a team and have them tackle it. If your recognition program needs a refresh, form a task team, pick people that you want to engage, that you want to light a fire, that you want to get actively involved so they feel a more meaningful purpose, and have them get involved in refreshing the program. And it does take constant, consistent review of those programs. So again, a refresher that you've got this suite of reports that you can use. You can use team dynamics reports to look at the dynamics of your team and how well your team members are wired to support each other, as well as the professional development assessments that we talked about. Barb is asking, what assessment would you suggest for a long-term employee? We actually only require they fill out the assessment once, Barb. So the benefit of Omnia is you take the assessment once. The beauty is we have multiple reports that you can run then to look at that employee. Someone who's been in the job a while, I would look at running a professional development report on them. If they're considering a different type of job, maybe to grow in their role. We know a lot of employees leave because they don't feel like they've got career advancement. Consider those long-term employees for maybe different types of positions. You could run reports for different types of jobs using the Omnia assessment they've already had. So if you're an Omnia client, Barb, we'd be happy to talk through what report would work for you. And if you're not an Omnia client, we'd be happy to talk to you about where to get started in our assessments. Thank you for asking the question. So to wrap up my fire story, I had to show you with some pride here. That's an actual picture of the fire the day that I talked about, that I shot. I have to laugh because I'm a kind of a neat freak, and yet I still to this day have lots of logs laying around my fire now. I have a pail that's got some kindling and some newspaper in it, and I have left it there. We have another cold front coming this weekend, so I hope I get to build another fire. But I was really proud. I sent that picture to my husband to show him how I had taken on the challenge and accepted it. And I found this quote that I thought fits so well. It's William Shakespeare, and I have to admit I don't always rely on Shakespeare for quotes, but this just stuck out to me. Fire that's closest kept burns most of all. So the fire that you keep closest to you will burn the longest. And that went back to that lesson I got of if I walk away from it and I'm not paying attention to it, those flames burn out really, really fast. So Barb, thank you for letting us know you're an Omnia client. We can talk with you a little bit more about those longer term employees and to think about engagement and motivation for them. So happy to have a sidebar conversation with you. I am going to take a few more questions. Before I do, I'd like to go back to the opening exercise and to have you recall again that person and that time where you felt valued and recognized. And if you would just put in the chat the way it made you feel, a few words of the feeling it left you with and that feeling that you recalled today. So if you would put how it made you feel in the chat. Thank you. I was really proud of that fire, Stephanie. But how did it make you feel when that person recognized you? I see valued, appreciated, valuable, energized. Yes. Valued, appreciated, appreciated. It's great. So I'll go one more step. I think it's really important that we as leaders get recognized too. We all want recognition. Like I said, I loved getting my anniversary card. If the person who you thought of is still alive, I would encourage you this afternoon to take a moment and let them know you thought of them and to go back and thank them and how you reflected about the way they made you feel. I bet it would really make them feel good and valued and appreciated if you took the time to do that. So I hope you all have the opportunity to do that later today. And I think you'll get a lot back from that exercise as well. And so I'll open it up to questions. And I've got a few more too that came in that I want to address. But any questions? And I apologize if there were some in the chat that I overlooked while I was yakking on and on. I had one question I really liked prior to the webinar. It was how to recognize achievements when you don't see people doing more than what is minimally required. And I've heard that said often time to time. There are some leadership personality styles who don't necessarily feel the need to be recognized, and they may not feel like the effort is worth the recognition, right? And I think sometimes that's a challenge. So I guess I would do some reflection there. If you've got people on your team who you don't feel like are doing what's required at a minimal basis, I think that's a little bit different of a conversation than recognition. That person may need some direct feedback on their performance or what they're bringing to the team. You know, this whole webinar has talked about how do you drive engagement and how do you keep your employees and actively engage them? But let's never, ever let go of the fact that the employee has responsibility too. So it could be a performance problem. I would just ask yourself and consider that. Or it could be an encouragement issue that is needed, that the person is lacking some self-confidence, self-esteem that we talked about. And sometimes you do have to reward the little things if that's the case. If this is an employee on your team who you feel is very valuable and that you can see really doing well on your team in the long haul, they just need a little bit of nudge and encouragement, then sometimes you do give some attaboys for what might be just doing their job, but for some reason that's taking more capacity from them or more effort. And so you recognize the effort. So, and yes, the slides will be shared. We always send out an email afterwards with the recording, so you will get those. And Raina, the person who gets recognized needs to be grateful to the person who recognizes them. It is, I think when you get that genuine thank you from the recognition you gave or the project or engagement you offer, I agree. If you receive a thank you back, you definitely know then that you hit the right mark, for sure. Great. And then one other question I got, and we'll close. I liked this one too. I have a problem employee. I want to recognize them without making them think their performance is okay. This is a challenging one, particularly when you're going to do group recognition on a project. So if you've got a project that you're going to celebrate everybody's success and you've already decided you're going to do equal reward, maybe everybody gets the same amount of money or everybody gets the gift certificate or the day off, whatever it is you've decided to do, I think then it's really important that that person get that individual feedback. Again, that's a performance issue. So you already agreed up front how everyone's going to be recognized. You wouldn't not want to recognize that person the same, but you've got to deal with them head on if they fell short on their project. And some peer feedback would probably be good too, because they probably let the team down in that. So you can't, if you reward someone when they fell short, you are sending mixed messages. So make sure you address that individual. So I hope that's helpful. I think I got to most of the questions either in the content of the presentation or just now. But if there's anything else that anyone wants to talk about, we're always here. Your Omnia team loves talking to you. I love talking to you. So give me a call, send me an email. Check out our resource page. Our producer just put it in the chat, and let us know how we can continue to help you. Yeah, I agree. I don't think anybody goes into leadership, Pamela, to get recognition. I still think it's kind of a lonely position, and that we can't expect every single employee to be thanking us for it. And that's not why we do it. We don't do it for the personal thank you or recognition. We do it because we're trying to get to an outcome and a behavior. Still, that's really what's in it, and why we're doing it. So I agree. It's not a quid pro quo. So very good point. So, all right. Well, I can't thank you all enough for joining today and for your engagement. I love it when the chat is active and that people are bringing in their own ideas. Thank you for your comments. It fueled me throughout the day. And for those of you up north, stay warm, build a fire. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.